Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Beebe from Beebe Outdoors. I'm here to talk to you about the bow fishing bow that I've used for this year, and honestly I've had this bow for years. Um, this is the exact same bow, the exact same setup that I used for all of my GLBC win shooting tournaments. I mean, I've had this bow for 7-8 years, and I mean, honestly, outside of the string, nothing's really changed on it. So I'm going to go through it and let you guys know what I'm using, what I feel is the best setup I have ever used. Always willing to change, always willing to look at other things, but this is the best bow that I have ever used for bow fishing. So let's get into it. All right, let's first start off with the bow. This is a CP Oneida Osprey SLF model. I've had this bow for probably 7 or 8 years now, and I basically had this exact setup forever now. This is the exact same bow that I used to win all 3 of the GLBCs with, and it's definitely served me well. This is, nothing crazy about this. It is a 30 to 50 pound model. Like I said, it's the SLF. It's got the normal let-off mods in it, 80-85%. And I mean, this bow is just it's been to war with me and back basically. But when I do shoot it, it's like an extension of my hand. You know, where I'm looking is where it's hitting. It's been a very reliable bow to me, and to me, this is the best bow that I've ever owned. All right, so the next part of the bow I want to talk about is my line puller here. I have no idea who made this line puller, honestly, but it's another one of the parts of the bow that I'm absolutely in love with. You know, you get an arrow stuck, you don't have enough time, you're constantly in the heat of the moment. You know, you'll see my videos where I've got the arrow out, I've got the gloves on. Another portion of it is having the line puller. You know, if you don't have enough time, if you guys are cruising, shooting a tournament or anything, you don't have enough time to stop to grab the arrow, and you know it's gonna, take a while to go get it. Wrap your line around this line puller 2-3 times, and I mean that thing absolutely pulls it out. This is an actual metal one. I have used the like the silicone models, things like that, the resin models. I have used them, but to me personally, I prefer these, the metal ones. I mean, I can't wear it down, I can't break it, so it's always been good to me. All right, so next, let's talk about the shelf rest. I prefer shelf rest. So I actually was shooting, oh gosh, this was forever ago. But like I said, I've been shooting this setup forever. But I was actually shooting with a normal rest that came out, screw in, things like that. Wasn't a shelf rest, wasn't a fixed rest, I would call it. And what happened was we were moving spots from one place to another, and the rest actually came loose. So when it came loose, it ended up moving a little bit while I was throwing off my shots completely. And at that time, we didn't have the Allen wrench to move it or anything else like that. So for the rest of the night, I had to worry about trying to get that rest and, hand moving it without over moving it. But after that, I decided, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to go to a shelf rest, and they've been incredibly reliable to me ever since. This is actually the second shelf rest I've ever owned. The first one, I ended up over screwing the set screw in there way too tight, and when I did that, it ended up actually cracking. But other than that, I've shot this exact same shelf rest. I mean, like I said, it's 2019, 2018, somewhere in there. This is a 6-7 year old rest. This is a Boondocks rest, and I mean, you can use, to each their own. I like to have the open top, so that way when I take that arrow, I can flip that arrow down, I can flip the line down, and it's in there. Some people like a full containment to where you're loading the arrow this way to where the knock's in. The string's always going to be in there, especially if you tie to the back. So that one right there is probably going to be more to each their own, but this is the rest that I choose. And I think anybody who's looking at getting a shelf rest is going to be looking in the right direction, at least in my eyes. All right, next, let's talk about the reel seat coming up to shoot through rod and the reel. To get rid of the easy one, I'm not reel specific. Kind of sounds funny saying that, but I've shot so many different reels. I own so many different reels, different brands, things like that. I have a tendency, because we're in Michigan, I have a tendency to not use my drag. Probably about 95% of the fish that I shoot, especially going for more numbers, I'm shooting less than 10-pound fish, suckers, gar, things like that. So with me having that, I don't set my drag. I just, grip and rip. That fish is there, the arrow's in it, the arrow's steady into it, you're ripping the fish in the boat. So I have a tendency to break my reels, pretty good at that. My anti-reverse is probably one of the biggest things I break, but if I was shooting more 25, 30-pound fish, then I would use my drag more. Unfortunately, I do not. So not really reel specific. So just throw that one out there. I got the shoot-through rod here. What's cool about the shoot-through rod is that if you see the big hole right here, when the string would come out of the big hole without the shoot-through rod, it would come out and it would spool out a little bit differently. Nowhere near as straight as, shoot-through rod's got this little itty-bitty hole here. Got a little itty-bitty hole on this side. When you shoot that out, it's so silky smooth. It goes into the water. You don't have a big blow up in the water. You can see where you hit, things like that. So I prefer these. And when you are fighting a fish, because it's metal and things like that, when you're, yanking back to bring the fish in, things like that, you're not putting that stress on your reel. That stress is out here on your rod. And there's definitely not enough stress that I've ever put this thing through to actually bend it or anything. On top of that too, lastly, we have a Gargod reel seat. I love my Gargod. I can't say enough about it. So what happens is that when I do blow up a reel, I end up pulling this piece back right here. You can pull it back. It's got a spring on the inside of it. You pull it back, you can take this whole entire reel off, and after that you can replace it with a new reel. So the benefits to me is that when we're out shooting numbers and things like that, if you're losing time on the water, you're losing time with a shooter, you're losing fish in the boat. So I can swap out a reel basically in under a minute, as long as the reels are close, and I'm back shooting. The loops are already tied, tie it through or send it through. We're back shooting in under a minute. So, a lot of this is a failure-proof setup, or if I do have a failure, that I can replace things really easy. Another cool thing about Gargod too is I ended up, I can't even remember what I bust on it. I think it was the little set pin in here. I ended up breaking one, and it's honestly the first time I've ever heard of one getting broke. But I ended up breaking one, so I messaged the owner, told him what happened, things like that, and he ended up sending me out a new one. So I can't speak enough about them, and it's just a really good company, so check them out. Last but not least, let's talk about the bowstring here. We've got our Predator custom bowstring. I've been shooting this for a couple months now, and I put easily a couple hundred shots onto it, and I haven't waxed it once, and the string still looks basically brand new. It's been definitely built to last. The last thing on it too is that we have our finger slick onto it. So the reason why I like the slicks over bigger rollers is because of the fact that the slick is thinner. So what happens is that when people shoot, let's see if I can get this on this side. So what happens is when people shoot, people like to tend to overgrip your bowstring. So if you overgrip your bowstring, it doesn't have nearly as much of a roll-off factor with the thinner grips, or if you have a thicker finger saber on there, and you start overgripping it and you roll, it'll actually throw off your shot. With the thinner ones, there's a much reduced chance that it's going to throw off your shot by doing so. So I got it big enough. I cut them to 3 3/4 inches. I got them big enough in order to get to the point where if you wanted to shoot 3 under, I'm not a 3 under guy for bow fishing, but if you shoot 3 under, they'll definitely have enough space here to be able to, cut it to a 3 under shooter. I shoot split fingers. There's definitely enough room here that with a split finger that, you've got enough for your finger space. I don't consider myself a regular, I consider myself a regular size guy. I'm not small, I'm not big by any means, but if I had bigger hands than what I do now, I like having all that added material in order to be able to grip it. If you're smaller, if you're, women, children, things like that with smaller hands, you could get away with a shorter finger slick and it would work out great. But cutting them to that 3 3/4, I just feel like it's a good mix for everybody, whether, you know, big, small, young, old, things like that. And they do have a lot of benefits there. So that's the reason why I cut them as long as I do. Well, that's it. This is the exact same setup I've used for years now. It's the exact same setup I've used for all the bow fishing videos that we've done this year. I've won all 3 GLBCs with this bow. So this bow is just something that I don't have to worry about when I'm shooting it. And with me not having the worries, and then I'm just worried about shooting fish and putting fish in the boat, I mean, this bow works out incredibly well for that, and it's just an ease of mind that I know that everything's going to work. And I think that's something that everybody needs to look at. You know, this bow might be the best setup for me, but it's also one of the things, too, of find something that you're comfortable with. Whatever your budget range may be, whatever your needs may be. You know, I shoot a lot of, honestly, I shoot a lot of 10-pound and under fish. I love shooting fish, but I like shooting little fish. I like shooting numbers. I like my big fish in April, but I like shooting my numbers. So this bow fits my needs. If I was down south and I was shooting big heads, grassies, you know, things like that, I would change up my setup, honestly. I would change up my setup for what I'm doing it with. But the biggest takeaway of this is that I have a bow for me that I don't have to worry about. I know the bow is going to perform when it needs to perform. I know exactly what it's going to do, how it's going to shoot, things like that, and I'm super comfortable with everything on this bow. So because of the fact that everything on this bow is so comfortable for me, the stress of shooting, the stress of, oh man, my arrow's kicking one way, kicking the other way, things like that, it's not there. And when I'm shooting stress-free, I'm throwing fish in the boat. So that's the reason why I shoot what I shoot, and hopefully there's a couple things that you guys can take away from this. If you have any questions, please go down in the comments and ask away. So, till next time.